Welcome to the Good Talk Podcast, where we remind you of the joy of life, the love of God, and the possibilities that lie ahead. Pete and Jordyn here with episode 86.
One thing keeping you from the life you really want. And you would think that by episode 86, we know how to intro this podcast every time.
Yeah.
We don't. How many
forgot.
times at the very beginning, obviously we edited it out, but he's like, wait, what's the podcast?
I forget. Well, I do a lot of different things and introduce a lot of different things, and yes. I'm like, what? Wait, what? How do we start this?
Yes. Episode 86. All right, one thing keeping you from the life you really want. That sounds good.
Yep. Hey, well, we're coming off a fantastic Valentine's Day,
yeah.
where I feel like if you listen to last week's episode, it sounded like I was pooping on Valentine's Day. I wasn't. I was just trying to provide a different perspective. Mm-hmm. I think I nailed it.
You did good. I will say we kind of mutually planned this one.
We did.
But I like the idea. I posted on my Instagram like a poll asking people what they thought, like who should plan it. And I was so like hard set on like the guy needs to plan it. Like doesn't mean the woman can't, do other things and like give him a card and gift and all that. But I come to the decision. I like the idea of it being planned entirely by one person one year, and then the next year is the other person, and you just alternate.
Yeah,
I like that.
Was it your mom that had that idea?
My mom, and then one of our friends, Derek, and then another first person said that. So, anyways,
I like that
had
idea.
Lots of that feedback.
So I did this year. You're up next year.
No, so I planned lunch. I made the reservations like way before you even thought about it.
Yeah.
And then you did breakfast, and then we got to the end of the night, excuse me, and we had bought stuff for dinner to make, and we didn't.
No. Well, we never do this. We ate out breakfast and we ate out lunch.
Yes.
I normally don't even eat breakfast, and I couldn't eat.
Yeah.
I had a granola bar.
It's a pretty bummer of a dinner, but the lunch and breakfast was really good.
It was great. And we did watch we said we were gonna watch like our favorite rom-com, but then there's a new one that just came out.
Yeah.
With
Ashton Kutcher and Reese Witherspoon.
Yes.
It's called Your Place or Mine.
It was okay.
Cute. I like them as actors.
I did too.
But I told him at the end of it, like if it weren't them, I would have liked it.
It was very predictable, but that is kind of the nature of a rom-com.
Yeah, it was sweet. It was fine.
Yeah, you know where it's going.
Yeah, if you're just like needing to feel happy, then that's a decent one to watch.
But we hope that whatever love you have felt celebrated this week.
Yeah.
And we also had the Super Bowl. We thought that was a great game.
Yeah, it was fine.
I thought it was a great game.
I was like, I don't know. I always have grand plans of like, oh, I'm going to watch all the good commercials. I'm going to really like pay attention to everything. And I'm like, we had how many boys over here?
A bunch.
Like 9 or 10 teenage boys. And so we're making pizzas and making dips and all of that. And so I feel like I really didn't get to pay attention. But Pepper watched the halftime show, y'all. If you follow me on Instagram, you saw this. But she got down to Rihanna.
She did.
She danced. I'm not joking. From the second the first note played to the last note, and she was spinning so much she was dizzy and falling everywhere. But it was really cute.
There's a lot of debate about that performance. I don't want to get into that.
No, don't get into that. That's
I don't
silly.
want to.
That's
I really don't have any strong opinion. It is what it is.
Yeah, it was fine. She's good music.
Yeah.
But yeah, so we had a good week. I'm excited, and then we're going to Georgia this weekend. So
Yes, we are.
We have lots of ping ponging around.
Yep.
All right, let's talk about the one
Life's
thing
good.
keeping us from the life we really want.
Yeah, so this was actually, I did a message on this a couple weeks ago up at church in Detroit, Northridge Church, which I know we have a lot of friends from there that listen to this podcast, so shout out to all my Northridge friends. But we kind of got into this topic in a message I was doing. They're doing a series in the book of Proverbs. And I don't know, I've thought a lot about this, and then yesterday I had a conversation with someone, and it kind of like, I don't know. I know I've always struggled with elements of pride, but it's just been a lot more colorful to me. I've seen the different ways it can impact my life and other people's lives more clearly lately. And so I thought, I think this is something good to talk about because you don't hear a lot of people talk about pride.
Yeah.
And
you don't really want to talk about it.
No.
That's the nature of it.
And one of the challenges for me addressing this in my own life, and for those of you listening to this, is very few people actually think that pride's a problem because we don't see it in our own life. And even if you're one of the rare people who see it, it's quite possible in our culture that you almost see it like maybe irritating at worst, but almost like a virtue, like part of being a strong, confident, high achiever is that you have to have this, kind of overwhelming pride that dominates the people around you. That's how you kind of get ahead. It's kind of a game we play. But just to be clear, the kind of pride that we're talking about in the next few minutes here is like, it's an over concern with self, right? It's this desire at all cost to be noticed. It's the love of supremacy. It's drawing attention to ourselves in every conversation. We've all known people.
I was going to say, isn't it
do
ironic?
that.
I immediately think of like certain people, but I don't think about myself.
Well, again, that is the challenge. The challenge, I'm telling you right now, over the next 15 minutes or so, for everybody listening to this, is you are going to be tempted to think about somebody else in your life who really needs to hear this podcast. Mm-hmm. But I really want to caution everybody, don't, this is about you, right? And this is about me. And yes, and I'll talk about this in a second, it's so much easier to see it in other people. And when we see it in somebody else, it repels us. Mm-hmm. Like we can't stand it.
Yeah.
But it's so difficult to see it in ourselves. And so one of the things that I think makes this topic kind of difficult and identifying it in your life difficult is that pride takes a lot of different forms for a lot of different people. So there's like three main forms of pride. First one being self-centeredness. This is kind of probably the form that most people think of when they think about pride, is just this, you kind of only see yourself, right? Me. It's like the joke I use sometimes is somebody hands you a picture, or they don't hand pictures much anymore. If somebody hands you their phone of a group picture that you're in, the very first person that you tend to look at in the picture is yourself. And then you decide whether or not it's a good picture based on how you think you look in the picture.
That's so true.
Everybody else could have their eyes closed, right? Or crossed.
This is great.
You're like, this is a great picture.
Yeah.
It's just kind of what we do, right? And so I think that we all have to be aware that the self-centeredness and this almost kind of critical heart that comes out of that can be something that is extremely damaging to our relationships. Eventually it ruins the quality of your relationships, because you approach every relationship as, what can this person do for me? It's all about taking, and it's not about giving. Mm-hmm. An example I used, and this involves you in a good way. It's bad on me. But a couple weeks ago, do you remember we went to Olive Garden?
Yeah, my favorite.
It's Jordyn's favorite restaurant in the world is Olive Garden. I mean, this girl
the world, but I
loves her some frozen, like...
Okay, it's really good salad, and those breadsticks are just delicious.
They are.
End of story.
Yeah, imagine if they weren't just frozen and warmed up in a microwave.
Oh, I know.
They'd be amazing.
I just love Italian anyways, but we digress.
We do digress, and I don't want to... crap on Olive Garden, because you can go there for $9.99 and get all you can eat soup, breadsticks, and salad.
Okay. So anyways, we were at Olive Garden.
We're there. Service was terrible that day, wasn't it?
It was really
bad. I mean, you can defend me on this. It was from the
bad.
time we walked in.
Nothing
was right.
Needed a high chair. We never got a high chair.
Waited probably 10 minutes to even be acknowledged that we were sitting at a table. Mm-hmm. And from there, it just went downhill.
Yeah, never got like water refills. It was just, all of our meals came separately.
Yeah.
Remember that?
And can I say that we're not real high maintenance restaurant
people?
No,
we were so chill. We were like, if you get a chance, could you bring?
Yeah. But inside we were dying. It's like, because we don't go out to eat much, although we just talked about how we went out to eat twice yesterday. But it's pretty rare for us. It's like once every couple of weeks probably. And it was just terrible. And I got in this mind, and I had to get back for work. Mm-hmm. We're running late. Food took forever. The last thing that comes out was a kid's meal, which was a pizza. Mm-hmm. It was bad. Anyway, I got in this place, if you remember, where I was just so like, this is so stupid. I don't have time for this. This is ruining my day. I'm going to be late. Why is this so bad? I'm like, Jordyn, don't you dare tip this girl a lot.
He did. I was so mad.
I know you were, and I get it. Like, I look back, and I was being extremely. The whole situation, all I could see it through was how it was inconveniencing me.
Well, and you were like, she didn't earn it, but like maybe she did, because she had 15 tables.
And that's my point. It was later that afternoon when I kind of came back down to reality that I actually thought about that woman. And again, we even talked in that moment. It wasn't just her. I'm sure there was issues with management, issues in the kitchen, and like plenty of issues there that day for sure. But the reality is, this is a woman who, I won't go into too many details, but it's clear, she's older in age. This isn't where she wants to be, right? I mean, there's some people that are really grateful that have a job as a server because they're maybe working on another dream, or they're just trying
they
to
just
ends
enjoy
meet. Yeah, or they
being-
enjoy it. I don't. I think because of her age and the season of life, this is not her dream. But she's doing what she has to do. She's probably putting food on the table for her kids, maybe grandkids. She's struggling. She's doing the best she can. And maybe she was having a really off day. I have off days in my work, and I'm so glad that people don't necessarily hold me accountable to that as if that's, the regular for me. So it wasn't until hours later that I just was able to kind of melt away some of the self-centeredness and think about, that's a person. It's a human being who's having a bad off day, right? But all I could see was me and my wants and my needs and my desires. That's kind of an extreme example, but that is what pride does, even in our most intimate relationships.
Yeah, that's good.
And that's just a huge form that it takes. And ultimately, I think what pride does is it blocks us from meaningful connection.
Yeah.
Because it's a one-way street where all we see is our needs and our desires. So that's one form of pride. Another form of pride would be self-reliance. And I have a problem with this one too. Like, I mean, how do you, because I think you struggle with this too, if I can be honest.
What do you mean self-reliance? Look, I know what
I
self-reliance
think you
is.
struggle, just like I do, asking other people for help.
Oh, yeah. I don't like it.
Yeah. And you may mask that as I don't want to put other people out. But often it's a form of pride. The bottom line is we actually think we don't need other people. And it's a massive community killer because we don't allow other people into our space to maybe service in a way they'd actually like to service.
Yeah, it's funny. I've never thought about that quality as being a prideful thing. I've always thought like, oh, I don't want to put other people out, or I don't want to, inconvenience somebody else.
But let's flip it.
But
Do you enjoy being able to genuinely help out a friend when they're in need?
Totally.
Of course you do. But it makes you feel needed, wanted.
Yeah.
It speaks to ego.
Yeah.
When we have to ask somebody for help, it's dying to self. It's dying to ego.
Right. You're having to say, I don't know how to do this, or I can't do this myself.
That's right.
Yeah,
and I need help. And again, we started with a pretty elementary example, but I want to speed this up real quick, and this may offend some of you, but there's some of you listening to this right now who are struggling with an addiction, and you've convinced yourself that you can pull yourself out of this on your own without being a part of a group or asking for help. And I just want to say, I think you probably need to humble yourself and ask for help, right? There's some of you that think that you can pull your marriage out of this ditch on your own without humbling yourself and asking for help or going to counseling. And I think you got to humble yourself and ask for help. I think there's some of us that think we can raise our kids all on our own and never seek the advice and the wisdom of other people. And we need to humble ourselves and ask people for help. There's plenty of people listening to this right now who think they can conquer their depression and their anxiety and their worries and their fears without asking their friend for help. And I think you need to humble yourself and ask for help. Admit that you can't do this all on your own.
Yeah, because nobody can.
Yeah.
But somehow in our brains, we've convinced ourselves that we're the only ones struggling with this.
Yeah.
So
I even see this in my relationship with God at times. Like this prideful, I don't need to pray about this. I don't need to act like I got this. Right. And it's interesting. There is this verse in Proverbs that says, in all his thoughts, there was no room for God, talking about a prideful person. And I think there's sometimes we don't think in our minds that we have room or space to admit that we need the strength of a higher power to pull us through something.
Yeah, that's good.
We think we can do it on our own.
Yep.
So pride leads us to believe that in many ways that the people around us are attracted to us because of our strengths and our accomplishments, our ability to handle a lot. But it's actually our authentic vulnerability that attracts other people to us.
Agreed.
That creates those connections.
Yeah, if you think about the people, of course, my brain goes to social media, right? 'Cause that's my world, and everything I do kind of flows through that. I think about the people I love the most to follow that I don't even personally know. It's the ones that are really real and being like, yep, my house looks like a bomb went off and it's not Pinterest worthy. And it's, because you're like, that's me too.
Yeah.
But it's the ones that look perfect and, and I mean, I'm equally as guilty to do this. I post the best things of my day. But yeah, you're right. It's like that vulnerable spirit that makes us connect to people so much more.
Yeah. And then there's that third form, and that's self-deception. And this is a form of pride. Again, we don't spend a whole lot of time talking about it for some obvious reasons. I don't think any of us like to admit this reality about ourselves. But even the smartest, brightest, most dependable people have the capacity as human beings for self-deception. We all do. And I think the reality is that it's possible there's some of you listening to this right now that are engaged in some activities, some practices. Maybe you have some habits that if you and I had the opportunity to kind of sit down and go out over a cup of coffee and I was somehow aware of these things, if I were to ask you, do you really think that's a good idea? Do you think that's helpful? Do you think that that's a behavior, an action, a thought that's advancing you closer to the kind of person you really want to become? If you were honest, you'd probably say no. If I were to say, hey, would you suggest to a friend that they should do this, think this, behave like this, you'd probably be, no, I would never encourage that. Or if I were to say, would you ever encourage your kids? You'd be like, no, absolutely not. But for some reason, there's a part of us that thinks, even though we've seen plenty of other people maybe engage in some of those different things or different practices or different decisions, and we've seen them suffer like crazy consequences for it, maybe in their career or in their relationships, there's something inside of some of us it's self-deception is what it is that makes us think that maybe we're above the rules, or that somehow those same consequences that we've seen play out in everybody else's life is not going to come down on us. We're going to get around us. We're smarter. We'll deal with this. We're not going to let it get out of control. And that's a version of pride. It's a form of self-deception. And I think this is key too. The more blessed you are, the more great things you have going on in your life, the more power you have, the more money you have, the more influence you have, the more giftedness you have, the more leadership you have, the more prone you are, I think, to self-deception.
For sure.
And so I always want to stay, there's certainly been seasons in my life where I've absolutely deceived myself, thinking that somehow this was going to work out better for me than it worked out for tons of other people that I had seen. And it didn't, right? I mean, it's this cause and effect that often happens in life. And it's a form of pride, the self-deception that convinces us that somehow it's going to work out better for us than it worked out for everybody else. It's usually not the case.
Yeah, that's so true.
So those are different forms. I don't want to stop there because it's not enough just to identify it. I think a bigger question is, how do we conquer it?
Right.
And I don't know if we ever conquer pride. Maybe the better term there is, how do we tame it?
Manage it.
Yeah. How do we manage it? How do we keep it from getting out of control in our lives? So 3 just real practical things. The first one is you have to analyze your motives. And because that's the thing about pride. Often it's not so much in what you say or even the actions or decisions you're making. It's about the motives behind what you say, the actions and decisions that you're making.
Okay.
And so you have to, think through it. Again, it comes in so many different forms. Essentially, pride is always hungry for attention. It's hungry for respect. It's really hungry for worship in all of its forms. So maybe for you, the way that it's coming out that you need to be aware of is this shameless boasting about yourself in every conversation. And it's not because you think you're better than everybody else. In fact, you think the opposite.
Right. It's almost more an insecurity.
It's overcompensating, but it's a form of pride. Maybe it's this is a big one. Maybe for you, it's being unable to say no to anyone because you have such a desire to be needed. Now, again, we don't think about that as pride, but that's exactly what it is. We so desire to be adored, to be worshiped, to be liked, to have attention, to have respect, that we don't have boundaries. We don't say no to other people because our desire to be needed is so strong. It could be, maybe this is a more obvious one. It looks like the desire to have the right car, the right house, the right title, so that other people kind of notice you and think good things about you. And for me, when I analyze my motives, we've talked about this before in the podcast, the most obvious area for me that pride has showed up again and again and again in my life is in my people pleasing.
Yeah, me too.
And so for analyzing my motives in that area, you have to be real careful because people pleasing often is viewed as really a a positive attribute by the rest of the world and certainly the people around you. You look like you're an amazing friend. You can make connections with anybody and everybody. You rarely say no because you rarely have boundaries when you're a people pleaser. And for me, though, I have to go back to my motives. And for much of my life, my motive was to be loved.
To be liked, yeah.
So many of the things I did was about trying to be loved by other people. But when I flipped that, the real desire of my heart is not to be loved, but to be loving. Because it's in the being loving that I actually am loved, if that makes sense. And so I have to check those motives all the time. Why am I saying yes to this? Why am I doing this? Why am I sitting here listening to this person right now and not shutting this conversation down?
Yeah.
Is it because I'm being loving? And if so, great. Press play, move forward. But if your main desire is to be loved, all you're doing is scratching that itch of pride in your life.
Yeah.
And
So
it doesn't
true.
lead to meaningful, connections, and it doesn't lead to a meaningful life.
So it like, I feel like could be a blurry line between being like wanting to do something to be loved and then to be loving.
Yep.
Like, I feel like that's a really fine line. And ultimately
It
it
is.
has to go down to like truly your why in your heart. It's not like, because you could say yes to a coffee with someone going through a divorce and you have 100 other things going on, but you want to help that person in the moment. But really you have 100 things going on. You're like, I don't have time for this. Like, is that still, even though like that would be your heartbeat to help that person, that's a loving thing, but you're also agreeing to it to be loved,
I have to check and say, what is my greater motivation here? How does this fit into the scope of everything that's going on in my life? And if my only motivation here is that I'm afraid if I say no to this, I'm going to get a rejection response.
Okay.
Then I'm doing it strictly out of kind of bolstering up my pride.
Yeah,
my
that
ego.
makes sense when you think about it in terms of like the response and what your reaction would be in the terms of the response. Okay, yeah.
I mean, again, I'm not discouraging people doing loving things for other people. You should, but do it from a motivation of love. There's zero strings attached here. I'm not looking for anything from you. I simply want to love you. I simply want to create a space for you in this moment that you're in, but I'm not expecting something out of you.
Okay, that's good.
If that helps. Again, I think part of humility is learning that you can't please everyone. Not everyone is going to like you, love you, think you're great. But when you're a prideful person, you think that you can get everyone to like you and love you and that you can get 100% approval rating from everybody in your life. But when you have true humility and you're centered in that, and again, this humility we're talking about is not thinking that you're not attractive or that you're not
It's not putting
gifted.
yourself down.
No.
Yeah.
No.
It's just, yeah.
It's having a healthy view of it.
And it's not your identity.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yep.
Exactly.
That's key. So again, that's just something to wrestle with there. But I think you have to start by analyzing your motives because of all these different forms that pride takes.
Okay.
Second thing I would say is you got to squash your critical spirit. If you find yourself being constantly critical of the people around you, nobody is ever enough. Your husband's not enough. Your wife's not enough. Your kids aren't enough. I promise you that's coming from a prideful spirit.
Okay. Elaborate.
Every single time. And so what pride does is it causes us to filter out our own shortcomings and at the same time filter out the goodness that we
things of
see in other
others,
people.
yeah.
And so then what you're left with is just, all their faults. And you just place all
And
their
your
faults
superiority.
right
Yeah.
into the perception of them. That's what it does. So, and again, this shows up in so many different ways. And we kind of hit on this a little bit earlier, but have you ever read a quote on Instagram and it starts to do a little surgery on your heart? You're like, you start to think about it. And then you're like, oh, this is good. And you immediately, your mind clicks to, there's a bunch of people who need this. And then you just repost it and you move on.
Yeah.
See, that's that thing, right? That it's that thing that, maybe I struggle with that, but there's other people who struggle with this a lot more. Right?
Yeah.
That's our pride, trying to avoid the surgery that we need to do on our own heart and soul, and instead pass that on to somebody else who needs it a lot worse than we do.
Right.
Right? That pride tends to make me want to skip past looking inward at the things that I need to improve, the things that I need to change, the things that I need to really put under the microscope, and instead I project that out on everybody else, which is why people who struggle with pride also struggle with having such a critical spirit where nobody around them can do enough.
Okay.
Third, you ready? Develop honest, authentic community. And this is massive because we, right off the bat, said pride is near impossible to identify in our own lives, which means at times we're going to need other people to help us see it.
Yeah.
You will not open yourself up to allowing other people to point out areas in your life that there might be pride if you don't have authentic, open community, and if you don't invite them to help you discover those things.
Yep.
So you need a safe environment, and don't just do this with like any old coworker, any old boss, or any old distant friend. Like, no, like this has to be someone you're in community with that you love and trust, and you know they love and trust you, and they'll speak truth, but they'll speak it with grace and love. But I think it's really difficult to see it in yourself. It's why, again, it's so easy to see it in other people. And I'll just tell you this right now. The people who know you the best already see the areas in your life where there's pride.
Yes.
And they could point them out like that so fast. Do you like that sound effect? I was snapping my finger, and then I went, I'm not sure why I did that.
Yeah, we're blowing out all of our eardrums today.
They can see it.
I agree. I made the face I made because I was nervous you were about to like point mine out because you looked at me.
No, I'm not going to do that to you until you ask me to do that.
Okay.
If you ask me to, I will. We don't have to do that now. But like and you see it in me. And when we open ourselves up in love and community and invite other people into that and say, you know what, I know that pride can keep me from becoming the best version of myself. And ultimately, my goal is to be the best version of myself as a husband, a father, as a friend. And I need your help in identifying some areas of my life where I could do a better job of trying to conquer and manage pride and not let it get the best of me.
That's good. I would actually invite you to that if we had more than a couple minutes left. I would be interested in that. Maybe another podcast.
Yeah, I've got some notes I'll share with you.
Okay, same.
No, I just think this is a big deal, and I know we're running out of time, but I had a conversation with somebody yesterday, and they kind of pointed out some things. And I didn't like it at first, what they pointed out. But the longer I sat with it, the more I was like, there's some truth here. I can actually take what they said, and I can better myself. And I can get more effective results in my life and what I feel like God's called me to do with my life. But my pride initially started to shut that down, and I would have missed a big learning moment there.
Yeah, that's good.
So
I like that. It's again why we didn't call the podcast like, oh, your pride is keeping you from
nobody's
XYZ.
going to listen to that.
You wouldn't listen to it, so we kept it at one thing keeping you from the life you really want. But it's so true. I mean, beyond like just like things you want to accomplish, it's the community, it's the relationships, it's all of that I feel like is non-existent if that is one of the biggest things you struggle with. And we all struggle with it, let's be honest. Like it is a core thing in everyone to be a little bit serving, self-reliant, all of that. But yeah, for that to be something that we're managing and working on, I feel like that is not something to like frequently even think about.
Nope.
You know, it's not, like you said earlier, it's not something you see a lot. It's not a lot of the quotes on Instagram. You don't see that. So I think it's such a good like reminder. And I would normally say share this with somebody, but you just said not to.
You can, but share it only after you reflect on it for yourself.
Yeah. And I think it's good. And I think it's a good tip too, to like invite people into that. And then there's a good chance they invite you into that for them. That's right. It's just kind of like this domino effect. It's really good. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Can't wait to hear the follow-up of what my pride points are.
Oh, that's next.
Episode 87. Jordyn and Pete are in different bedrooms. Thank you so much. And you guys, I hope you had a great week. I hope a good Valentine's. And I hope you guys have another good week coming up. And we will be back next week with episode 87.
Ooh, right. That was another
good talk.